Welcome to my video series of database management system. In this video, you will be learning about entity relationship model or ER model or entity relationship diagram in database management system. This is my lecture 2 on ER model. In this lecture, you will be learning about introduction to ER diagram or ER model. What is an entity in ER model? So this lecture 2 is purely based on entity. What is an entity? You will be learning in this video lecture. So what is an entity in ER model? Types of entities in ER model with the help of an examples. So I request you, please stay tuned till the end of this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. Thank you. In this video of ER model, I will be training you how to create an ER model or a diagram of a given situation of a database. So in this, let's consider whenever we create a table in database directly and do the designing work without any modeling tool or language, then database will face many issues, problems when it comes to any update in the design of a table. So that's the reason we use ER model or ER diagram. I will be explaining you this with the help of an example. Let's see what is an ER model or what is an ER diagram. Both are same. ER model. ER model stands for entity relationship model. Entity relationship model. Entity is a real world object relationship, how the real world objects are having a relationship among themselves in a database. So this model is used to define the data elements and their relationship for a specific system. For example, I have a company of some production. I have some production company. So in that production company, I will be having different departments on the different data elements. So how these data elements will be communicating among themselves will be specified in our database model. The ER model defines the conceptual view or design or blueprint of a database. Conceptual view or design or blueprint. It means that before creation of a database, we'll be having how the database look like, how the different elements of a database will be communicating. So in detail, the ER model will define everything how our data elements will be having a relationship. So it is a high level data model. ER model is a high level data model used to model logical view of the system from data perspective. What is a data perspective? How the data should be visible, how the data should be visible, how the data should be communicating, how the data will be communicating with other data. So it's a high level data model purely based upon data perspective, having below components. What are these components? Entity is one component, entity type is one component, and entity set. So in detail I will be telling about what is an entity, what is an entity type, what are entity sets. So in ER modeling, database structure is portrayed as a diagram called entity relationship diagram. Whenever we are going to create a ER model conceptual view, it's nothing but a diagram. So that diagram is going to portray the basic structure, how our database look like, An entity relationship model, that is ER model, describes the structure of a database with the help of a diagram which is known as relationship diagram, that is ER diagram. ER modeling helps you to analyze data requirement systematically to produce well designed database. So without ER modeling, we cannot create a database. It will help us to analyze the data requirement systematically to analyze the data requirement systematically, and based upon our analysis we can produce well designed database as per the requirement. So let's see this example of ER diagram. Let's consider I have a table, student table. So physical table, I have a student table wherein I have columns or the field name such as student roll number, student name, and its phone number. Let's consider I have another table college where I have the fields such as college code, college address, and a phone number. Now, how these two tables are in relation? As we know, students will enroll into the college, will enroll into the college for to learn some course. So we can say student studies in college. We can say student studies in college. So studies will be the relationship between student table and college table. So this is an table representation. Let's consider the same thing with our ER model representation, diagrammatical representation. Student table. So here student table will be called as student entity in relationship model, that is ER model. So student is an entity having the attributes student roll number, student name, and student phone number. So all these are attributes of our student entity. And I have a college entity. The attributes of college entity is college code, college address, and college phone number. All these are its college entity attributes. So this is my student entity and college entity. In the above you can see student table and college table. So in ER diagram we'll be having entities. So student entity and college entity. So student entity having its own attributes, college entity is having its own attributes. Now what is the relationship? The relationship is student is going to study in college. Student studies in the college. So studies will be the relationship between student and college. So this is a basic example of our ER diagram. Let's see the components of ER model. So what are the different components? So in ER model, we have seen entity, attributes, and relations. So these three are our major components. These three are our major components of ER model. So what are these components? Entity, attribute, and relationship. So every entity will be having attributes. What is an attribute? It's a characteristics of an entity. Characteristics of an entity. So I have three components of ER model, that is entity, attribute, and relationship. So let's see this entity. So entity is of two types, strong entity and weak entity. Strong entity and weak entity. Attribute. So attribute will be of four types. First, key attribute, composite attribute, multivalid attribute, and derived attribute. Next, coming to relationships, I will be having unary relationship, binary relationship, and n-ray relationship. With respect to this relationship, I will be having the cardinality constraints such as one to one, one to many to many to one. So all these are my cardinality constraints with respect to my relationships such as unary, binary, and n-ray. Let's see the entity. What is an entity? An entity is a real world thing or an object which can be easily identified, such as person, place, or a concept. So here we will be having two types of entities. We will be having two types of entities. One is tangible entity, next is intangible. So coming to tangible, which exist in real world physically. Example, person, car, building, student, college, etc. Whereas intangible exist only logically, have no physical existence. Example is bank account. You cannot touch the bank account. It's a logical. So like this, we have two types. So let's discuss more in detail about entity. So let's consider a pen. Pen is an physical object to which you can touch and feel. It's a tangible. So it's an entity. Pen is an entity. So as we know, every pen will be having certain characteristics. Every pen will be having certain characteristics, such as name. Every pen will have a certain name, like Uniball, as you can see in the picture. Every pen will be having a barcode or a pen ID. Every pen will belongs to certain brand, like Parker, Reynolds, Rotomac, like this. Every pen will be having its own type, like ball pen, ink pen, gel pen, etc. Every pen will be having its price based upon its type and brand. So all these are the characteristics of the pen, of the pen. So pen is an entity. So how I can create an entity diagram of this pen? So let's see this pen. Pen is an entity. This pen is having its characteristics, which are called as attributes, so this pen is having its characteristics: name, barcode, type, brand, price. All these are its attributes. Every entity, if it is tangible or intangible, in every entity we will be having two types: strong entity and weak entity. So here I will be telling you about strong entity. A strong entity will always have a primary key. What's a primary key? Primary key is a key which uniquely defines each row in a table. So strong entity will always have a primary key. A strong entity is not dependent of any other entity in a schema. Strong entity are represented by single rectangle. Strong entities are represented by single rectangles. The relationship of two strong entities is represented by a single diamond. So various strong entities when combined together creates a strong entity set. If we have a set of strong entities, if I combine together strong entities, then that particular entity set will be called as strong entity set. What's a weak entity? Weak entity does not have any primary key. It means a weak entity is dependent on a strong entity to ensure its existence in a schema or a design or an ER diagram. A weak entity is represented by a double rectangle. The relationship between one strong entity and one weak entity is represented by a double diamond. Let's see the example of strong entity and weak entity. Let's consider one entity, student, and its attributes are student ID and student name. Whereas student ID is a key attribute by using which this student table will be uniquely defined in the entity set. So here we have a student entity and its attributes are student ID and student name. Another entity I have is grades. So grades is a weak entity. So that's the reason it is in double rectangle. So and its attributes are grade ID and percentage. As everyone knows, grades are purely depends upon the student performance. So grades is a weak entity, student is a strong entity. So always grades depends on student. So that's the reason student is a strong entity and grades is a weak entity. So how these two are in relation? Student will secure the grades. So secure is a relationship between student and grades, as well as this secure is having an association between strong entity and weak entity. That's the reason this relationship is in double diamond. So double diamond is a relationship between a strong entity and weak entity. So this student entity is a strong entity, great entity is a weak entity. So in coming video you will be learning more in detail about database management system and ER model. Thanks for watching this video. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share my video. Thank you.